Okay, we have some somber breaking news to share with you now. Former Liberal cabinet minister and astronaut Marc Garneau has passed away. Garneau was a Quebec Liberal who served as a member of Parliament from 2008 to 2023. Garneau served as both Transport and Foreign Affairs Minister in Justin Trudeau's cabinet. He made history in 1984 when he became the first Canadian to fly in space. Garneau flew on 3 space shuttle missions and later became Deputy Director of Canada's astronaut program. Garneau was 76 years old. Here with me are former NDP MP Matthew Dubé, who served with Marc Garneau, as well as former Chief of Staff to Liberal Cabinet Ministers Stevie O'Brien. Look, I know you're here for the regular panel, but thank you for coming in early to respond to this. Matthew, I know you served with Marc Garneau and would take the train back and forth with him. What are your thoughts at hearing this news?
Well, first and foremost, our condolences to his family, of course, right, and his friends and loved ones. It's funny for me because being, it's horrible to sound like a narcissist in a moment like this, but for being a young MP, the man was already a legend for having gone into space, and growing up knew him for that accomplishment, and then to serve in Parliament and to see him doing that work at a time where he arguably didn't have to. He ran for leader, right, of the Liberal Party, the leadership contest that Justin Trudeau won, and he always had a way of being partisan in the House, but that was good-natured and good faith, and something, quite frankly, that's probably missing a little bit from politics today. And to the point you made off the top, I remember seeing him on the train all the time. The kind of things that people don't really realize. They're thinking, this man's an astronaut, cabinet minister. He was a cabinet minister, and you'd see him on the train back and forth from Ottawa to Montreal. So
just the commute from his home to work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the kinds of things that people wouldn't think of a man of that distinction and accomplishment in that kind of role. And so I think it says a lot about him. And even in the last couple of years where he's been a bit more critical of the government that he served in, doing it with, again, I'll just reuse that word, distinction. I think it's warranted under the circumstances, and our hearts go out. But a great Canadian and someone who served in more ways than any of us ever will. Yeah,
and you use the phrase "good faith." I think that's a good descriptor for the way Marc Garneau conducted himself in his public life. Stevie, I know you're a chief of staff, not for Marc Garneau, but at times when he was in cabinet and when he was part of the government you were in. And just what were your thoughts on hearing this news?
I think it's a very sad day for many in the Liberal family. Many people in caucus and other cabinet ministers I know will be very sad about this news. He was a great Canadian, as Matt has already pointed out, and just also a very great, sweet person. He is the type who would show up at goodbye parties for other staff. He was spoken highly of by his colleagues. He was always sort of a gentleman and a very thoughtful politician. And one of the things I remember most is in the 2021 election, how during the campaign he was still actively working with the two Michaels and successfully negotiating their release. And that was another sort of a great achievement on top of being in space, on top of being a minister, something that we all as Canadians look to and were appreciative of.
Yeah, I remember interviewing him in his office as he was ending his political career, and his staffers like Marc Waugh, who served with him for a long time. Our condolences to him and to Mr. Garneau's family. We have a statement here from his wife, Pam Garneau. She says, "It is with deep sadness that I share the news of my husband, Marc Garneau's passing. Marc faces final days with the same strength, clarity, and grace that defined his life. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by the love of his family. We wish to express our heartfelt thanks to the outpouring of support, concern, and kind words received over the past few days. We are especially grateful to the medical team who provided such dedicated and compassionate care during his short illness. We kindly ask for privacy as we grieve this profound loss and take time to reflect and heal." And that is a statement from Pam Garneau, who is Marc Garneau's wife. Quick last thought there, Matthew. It was a quick and sudden illness, is what we're being told, or what it sounds like there. Quick final thoughts before we take a break.
It puts things in perspective. I have the privilege of serving with the Canadian Association of Former Parliamentarians, and every year a number of members of Parliament leave us, of course, and it's a good reminder that no matter how intense things get, it's people who want to serve, and as I said, he's someone who served in so many ways, and so it's important to remember that there's human beings behind that as well as you read a statement like that, and so you can't help but have a load of love and empathy for the family and those who worked with him.
Stevie?
Thoughts just to his family and friends, and so many members of the Liberal caucus who must be grieving the loss of such a great man. And I keep thinking about that human element and how much he was a Montreal Expos fan and how he would talk about that at every occasion. And it's sad.
Okay. Well, Matthew and Stevie, thanks for coming in with your reflections here. And as we go to break, just a moment of silence. Just a few minutes ago, for this sad news in the House of Commons, the first Canadian in space and a former cabinet minister, Marc Garneau, has died at 76. This tribute in the House of Commons just a few seconds ago.
Mr. Speaker, we just learned moments ago that former parliamentarian Marc Garneau has passed away at the age of 76. And with your indulgence, I would ask for a moment of silence from the House for that. I would ask for unanimous consent for that.
For a minute of silence.
We have unanimous consent from all members. Okay.
All right, for those of you just joining us, some sad news we've learned this past hour. Former Liberal cabinet minister and astronaut Marc Garneau has died. Garneau was a Quebec Liberal who served as a member of Parliament from 2008 to 2023. He served as both Transport and Foreign Affairs Minister in Justin Trudeau's cabinet. Garneau, of course, made history in 1984 when he became the first Canadian to fly in space. Garneau flew on 3 space shuttle missions and later became Deputy Director of Canada's astronaut program. Garneau was 76 years old. In a statement, his wife Pam writes, "It is with deep sadness that I share the news of my husband Marc Garneau's passing. Marc faced his final days with the same strength, clarity, and grace that defined his life. He passed away peacefully, surrounded by the love of his family. We wish to express our heartfelt thanks for the outpouring of support, concern, and kind words received over the past few days, and we are especially grateful to the medical team who provided such dedicated and compassionate care during the short illness. We kindly ask for privacy as we grieve this profound loss and take time to reflect and heal." Well, Ontario Liberal MP Chris Bittle served as Parliamentary Secretary to Marc Garneau when he was Transport Minister, and he joins you now. Chris Bittle, it's good to see you in a difficult moment. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thank you so much.
What were your thoughts when you heard the news? This was very sudden with Mr. Garneau.
It was very sudden. I was sitting in the House of Commons and a lot of tears in the House. He was a real gentleman that was truly respected on both sides of the House. It was sudden. I don't think anyone knew, even those who were closest to him were taken aback. When I was appointed as his parliamentary secretary, someone took me aside and said, you know, there are 4 schools in this country already named after him. So it was truly an honor to be working with a Canadian hero, but someone so humble and someone we can get behind, and someone who had a calm hand, especially at the time that I got appointed to that file. The rail system was shut down by blockades, and then immediately the transport system had to be shut down through COVID. But he was a steady hand, a calm hand. Having been through the Navy and the astronaut program, perhaps politics was fewer emergencies at that point, and perhaps the training kicked in. But a true gentleman we don't see often enough in the House of Commons.
Matthew Dubé was just here, and he served with Mr. Garneau in Parliament, and they're both Quebec MPs, and they would take the train into Ottawa sometimes together. And the words he used to describe Mr. Garneau was good faith and serve with distinction. And I think that's a good summary of how he approached things, like a partisan, but not one of these hyper partisans that you sometimes see overtake things in politics.
No, he rolled his eyes occasionally at some of the over-the-top stuff. He was interested in getting stuff done, getting things built on his file, getting the transportation system moving again during COVID. And he was an incredibly bright individual who probably oftentimes put too much on his shoulders, but he was the type of person who would say, get on my back, everyone, we got this. And he was an incredible person to be within caucus, to be able to talk to, and someone who was incredible to work with.
When you're pulled aside after you get the appointment to be his parliamentary secretary, to be told this is a guy with 4 schools named after him, right? Like that's the sort of thing that happens long before you're done, long after you're done with politics, not like when you're still in the middle of your political career. It speaks to his life.
Absolutely. It's a name I remember as a school, from elementary school, as many Canadians do, as the first Canadian in space. And then to be, hey, you're going to work with this true Canadian icon. And it wasn't too long after that, I took my kids to a couple museums in Ottawa, and he was featured in both the Canadian War Museum and the Aerospace Museum at the other end of Ottawa. And you're taken aback, but you wouldn't know that being in the room with him. He wasn't, even though he was a larger-than-life figure in Canadian history, he was a down-to-earth individual and someone who was easy to work with.
It's interesting that people you meet like Mr. Garneau, because I did an interview with him when he was leaving politics, he has done truly extraordinary things, but he never told you about them, because everybody else would tell you. You know what I mean? Like the truly great don't have to brag about some of the things they've done.
Absolutely. I would joke when I'd appear on his behalf at events as parliamentary secretary and have to tell people, I know you're disappointed. You were expecting to see this true legend of Canadian history, and you would never know it if he just walked in the room and you never knew who he was. And he'll be greatly missed.
You know, astronauts, you don't get to be a cabinet minister and have a career like that, but you sure don't get to go to space without being extremely disciplined, extremely driven, and extremely demanding on yourself. Was he also demanding on others? I mean, what was it like to be a parliamentary secretary, him as a minister, in terms of the expectations? Or did you just feel the pressure to live up to it because of who you were working with?
I think more the latter, that I felt the pressure to live up to that, because here is this icon that I knew about growing up and not wanting to disappoint it. It's like not wanting to disappoint your grandfather in some way. And he was always kind to me and always patient with me. And we had very good conversations through some very difficult times in this country's history to oversee the shutdown of our transport sector as the transportation minister was not an easy task. And so he always held himself with honor and respect, and I think you'll hear it across the aisle from members from the NDP, from the Conservatives, and even the Bloc, of how well respected he was and how trusted his voice was.
You referenced the Wet'suwet'en blockades that you had to navigate as Minister of Transport. COVID and the shutdown of everything there. I remember, was it the 737 MAX? Was that the plane that had the guidance problems and it crashed? And I remember Mr. Garneau, as minister at the time, giving a technical briefing in the old National Press Theatre, and you reminded of the fact that this guy went to space and had military training, because he could explain everything on the technical aspects of why it happened, how it happened, and he kind of recreated it with his hands and his words.
I remember a humble brag. We were waiting for a meeting, and someone came in and said, "Oh, Mark, the Russians have fired this missile at Mach 15 or something like that." And he smiled and said, "Well, I went to space at Mach 25. And he wasn't one to usually talk about it, and I think his staff had one day a year where they could ask him anything they wanted about space, and so they would have a sit down and have that opportunity to ask everything from Tang all the way down to using the washroom and everything in between. And he really wanted to get to work, which is why it was one day only, but again, an incredible individual.
It's funny, you mentioned the Tang, like a serious guy who had done serious things, but he could make light of it. I remember when he was running for Liberal leader, and Mark Critch with 22 Minutes got them all together, the candidates at the time, in like a cafeteria, it might have been on Parliament Hill, and got their drink order. And Marc Garneau goes, "I'll have Tang." He's like, "Yes, we know you've been to space." It's sort of self-deprecating, right? So humility and a sense of humor, even despite being a person with 4 schools named after him.
Absolutely. It's remarkable to be able to have that time with him. Any colleague who has been through this will say the same thing. Not the loudest person by far, never the loudest person in the room, but when Mark spoke in caucus, everyone listened.
Well, Chris Bittle, I want to thank you for coming here and speaking to us. It's a difficult day, right? You know, getting the sudden news of the passing of a colleague, certainly someone you respected and admired so much, and our condolences to the family and to people like Marc Waugh, who was a good staffer for Marc Garneau for many, many years. So, Chris Bittle, we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, MPs on Parliament Hill, other MPs on Parliament Hill have been sharing their memories as they learned today of Marc Garneau's passing.
The man was a giant. You know, I first met Marc when he ran for leader before I was an MP, and then I had the privilege of serving with him, and he was the epitome of a gentleman, and he was a giant. I mean, I used to say to Marc, I said, all the things you've done here in Parliament Hill, but you went to space. Like, the guy, like, he's a great Canadian.
We became good friends. Obviously, he's a Canadian hero by definition. He was a Canadian in outer space. I used to joke with him when he was Minister of Transportation. I'd say, it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out, but hey, you are a rocket scientist.
He was a very noble person. You know, he never came across as arrogant or would not listen. You know, he was always willing to listen.
He was an active member, a conscientious individual who cared about what government meant and what work we were doing. He really took it seriously and with great care.
You know, really one of the highlights of my career as an MP was the year I spent as his parliamentary secretary. And he was absolutely dedicated to engaging me as a colleague, as a friend, as someone whose opinion I think he valued. He had in his calendar Thursdays with Rob, and it's just a huge loss for me just to think that Marc isn't going to be there.
Marc Garneau served in Parliament from 2008 until 2023. He served as both Transport and Foreign Affairs Minister in Justin Trudeau's cabinet, and of course made history back in 1984 when Marc Garneau became the first Canadian to fly in space. Marc Garneau passed away today. He was 76 years old.